Colorado week is here, and Gary and I just finished a 4-hour conversation about what makes a rivalry. I think it's proximity and hatred of the other. He thinks it has to do with the games actually meaning something. No matter where you line up on that, whether you're a Husker fan or a Colorado fan listening to this, you probably hate the other. Last year, Nebraska got slapped, but this year, Gary, you know the Huskers are ready to win. Should we be expecting a blowout or a close game, and who wins?
I think this game's going to be close for about a quarter and a half. And then I think Nebraska is going to just pull away and do pretty well against them. And I know a lot of people are, well, they got different guys on the lines and this, that, the other. Okay. But it didn't look like it against North Dakota State. And I know Colorado fans are tripping over themselves to let everybody know how great North Dakota State is and how they'd probably knock out Georgia and Alabama in the playoff if they were, in a Power Four conference. But when you look at both teams' first games, and let's not forget, Nebraska, I don't think there's an argument, got better. If these guys that Colorado pulled from Pittsburgh, Houston, Dartmouth, whatever else to put on the line is going to make them incredibly better, then I think it's pretty fair to say that a 5-star number 1 overall recruit quarterback would make the other team significantly better, especially when you go to last year and look at why Nebraska lost to Colorado, because the quarterback couldn't feel a snap several times and gave that explosive offense the ball real close to the end zone multiple times. So Nick Saban on game day last week, when he was asked about the portal, he's like, yeah, just because you can go get a bunch of players doesn't make them the right players. I'm paraphrasing because I know he said, you could end up with a bunch of shit or something like that, be shit out of luck. But there's a lot of truth to it. It sounds nice that like, oh, we got all these guys out of the portal. That doesn't mean they're stud players. It doesn't mean they're not either. Like, don't get it wrong. I'm not saying they went and built their lines with worse players. I don't think we know. But I do know that if North Dakota State can average just under 4 yards rushing, and that's factoring in some some receivers trying to carry that didn't work out, some sacks, things like that skew the numbers. I don't see Nebraska having trouble owning clock. North Dakota State had time of possession, I think, plus 13 minutes more than Colorado. Colorado is very, very good in the passing game. They've got a great quarterback. They've got some great wide receivers, but they live and die by the big play. They don't impose their will on defense. That's why they didn't look good once they finally got into their conference play last year.
If NDSU can force them to pass and take away the run, I'm very hopeful that we can.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of it was being forced. It just seems like they're content. And I could go off on a whole nother deal about Dion and getting his kid into the NFL and things like that for my ideas of why. But it seems like Colorado is just content throwing the ball about every chance they can. I know Dion came out and said they've got to establish the run and things like that. Maybe they do, but when I heard him say that, I'm like, well, good luck doing it this week. If you couldn't do it last week, a lot of Colorado fans and YouTubers or content creators, whatever you want to call it, that I've watched and checked out since that game, they're real quick to tell you their defense looks so great because they held them to 3.7 yards per carry or whatever. And it's like, well, you got held to 2 point something yards per carry. But that's probably because they have such an amazing defense, because they're such an amazing team now that they played them. Take the flashiness of Dion and all the fanfare and everything else out of it. And this is just another team. Let's say this is Nebraska, and they're coming off of a 4-win season, and they changed basically nothing, but we're gassing up these guys that we brought from these other schools or these grad transfers on the lines, which was the biggest problem. Nobody's thinking, oh man, they might get into the playoff this year. They're going, yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. And then to come out and squeak out a win against an FCS school, it doesn't make me fear them at all. It doesn't make me concerned at all that Nebraska is going to have trouble with this team. Again, I fully expect Colorado to have some explosive plays because Hunter and Shador and Horn and those guys, they're just that good. I don't care who the secondary is, who the defense is. I don't see anybody blanking them or keeping them to where it's next to impossible for them to find the end zone.
And Shador is just so good at extending plays.
So good. He's very good at it. There's my dislike for Colorado and the frustration with like every commercial's a Dion commercial and everything you open your phone and every alert and everything. During that game last week, I got probably 15 different alerts on my phone when Colorado did something. I thought Colorado would be up 60-0. And every time I look at the game, I'm like, holy shit, dude, they might lose this game. And I never got one thing that, like, again, if Nebraska's playing a team like that, or most other teams are playing a team like that, my alerts are going to go upset alert. This team that you see on TV 24/7 and everybody talks about like it's the greatest show on turf is potentially about to lose to an FCS school. There wasn't any of that. And it's like, that makes me dislike Colorado so much. But it doesn't make me ignorant to the fact how good their quarterback and receivers are, right? So I fully expect Nebraska's going to have their hands full with that. But don't get it twisted. Colorado's offensive lines and defensive lines are going to have their hands full. If they had that much trouble with North Dakota State being undersized and, just, I mean, call it what it is, no disrespect, but there's a reason there's two different leagues. It's lesser talent. And now you're going to go into an environment that they haven't played in. It's just Shador and them have never played an environment like what they're going to be in Saturday night. And I don't know from an X's and O's standpoint, what would make people think, and anything can happen in football, right? I kind of had this, not as confident, but kind of the same idea or vibe last year going into that game. But I didn't know that Jeff Sims was going to fumble 5 snaps and throw a pick, and then running backs were going to fumble and everything. I mean, like if that stuff happens, yeah, they're going to dog walk us because they have an explosive offense.
Anyone would dog walk us in that situation. It doesn't need 100%. To be Colorado.
North Dakota, UTEP would have dog walked us if we handed them the ball on their side of the 50 5 extra times during the game because we can't hold on to snaps. So, I mean, just from what we've seen, I don't see how Colorado is going to get off of the field, get their defense off of the field. If we decide we're going to run and own clock on them. I don't see how they're going to grind out yards to convert a bunch of 3rd or 4th downs to sustain drives. They are going to have some explosive plays here and there, but Shador, as much as he was running around in that North Dakota State game, crank that up a few times and factor in he's not going to hear anything at the line. He's not in Colorado. He's not playing, some Pac-12 school that has half the stands are full and they're just kind of into the game, whatever. I really think that there'll be a little bit of a feeling out process earlier on. I wouldn't be surprised if Nebraska comes out very run heavy just to kind of stall Colorado's offense from being able to get into a rhythm, having too much time on the field early on. But I think once the coaching staff kind of sees what it needs to see and makes its adjustments, there's a lot of talk about Colorado making these great adjustments at halftime against North Dakota State. I mean, if calls go a little different and the clock keeper is not sleeping half the time, they're 3 yards away on a Hail Mary from losing that game for the great adjustments they made, the great additions they made to their trenches, all of that stuff. I just think is going to really be exposed if Nebraska can play it somewhat is clean. Like they weren't perfectly clean in UTEP. I mean, it's game 1 with the new quarterback and things like that, but they didn't let the sloppy things or the mishaps create a domino effect like they've done in the past. And granted, Colorado's not going to be UTEP. I'm not delusional to that either. I just think with this quarterback, with another year under this coaching staff, I think there's zero question our offense and defensive lines are better. Our defense as a whole is better. Our run game's better. Don't get into a shootout with them. I think you gradually start wearing on them and pulling away around halftime, and it just turns into kind of like last year when they beat us and the scoreboard looked like they just beat the brakes off of us. That was a really close game at halftime. A lot of people, myself, I think we've talked about it, but you listen to a lot of other people breaking down the game from last year. It seemed like Nebraska was turning and having the momentum coming up towards halftime until you had the missed field goal, then you had the fumble, and then cascade of turnovers in the second half. I could see probably not turnovers. Shador's too good for that, but just Nebraska imposing their will on them throughout the first 2-3 quarters. I think it'll look a little more lopsided at the end of the game than what it'll actually be. But I don't think Nebraska will have too much trouble with this game, honestly. I know a lot of people are going to think that's insane or a crazy thing to say, but again, take all the flash and fanfare out of it, put a different decal on the helmet, put a different coach on the sideline, and talk about that exact same roster from top to bottom. You would go, they absolutely have an insane package for the passing game. Their quarterback, their receivers are insane. Most people, I bet half Colorado fans don't even know who their running back is because he touches the ball so little. Their lines aren't there. Their linebacking core, their pass rush, none of those things are on a level that I think Nebraska played when they had their little win streak last year. And I don't think there's any doubt Nebraska is significantly better this year than they were last year.
You mentioned you're not sure how Colorado's going to get themselves off the field on defense. Nebraska should be able to control the pace. I think the Huskers win. I didn't last year, but I really do this year. But the one thing that gives me pause, the one thing I think we should be worried about, it's not should we or should we not storm the field? Which the answer is absolutely do not storm the field. The question is he going to continue to play Raiola like he's a junior All-American, or is he going to treat the Colorado game a little bit differently and do what you're saying? Control the clock, run the ball, get them dog tired. I think the one dangerous thing that could happen here is Matt Rule has said he'd rather lose early in the season than late in the season. So he's going to use the beginning of this season, I'm paraphrasing now, to work things out and get better so that we can win at the end of the season. If he goes out there and treats this like we're going to do whatever we want, you could have some interceptions, you could have some fumbles, but then again, there's no guarantee that won't happen if you play conservatively too.
So when you look at the UTEP game, the one turnover we had that entire game was on the ground running. So the idea that we won't put the ball in the air a lot to negate turnovers, you might get more, if you start having issues with the running backs dropping the ball. But at the same time, with what you're saying, Matt Rule said, you can't come out trying to play safe to negate turnovers on either side, from the passing aspect or the running aspect. Like, you have to do what you think is going to win you the game. And early on, I think it's going to be the best way you can help your defense and shut down Shador and Travis Hunter and Horn is to keep them on the sidelines. So if you feel like you can impose your will and run the ball down their throat and eat clock, at some point, they're going to have to sell out to try and stop the run. And now you've got a legit quarterback that can make them pay for that. We've got a guy that can extend plays too. We've got a guy that's very accurate as well. We've got a stable of receivers that we know how good they are. A lot of the country doesn't, and they're not going to hype us up or talk about it. And rightfully so. They played one game together against a team that was what they were. I'm not bitter about that by any means, but I'm saying we have the ability to attack Colorado on offense in multiple ways while trying to own time of possession and keep their offense on the field or on the sidelines. So I think you can do both things. I think you just try to impose your will on the ground. And when they try to sell out to stop that, because I think most people don't think they'll be able to stop it until they sell out. You've got a guy that can make them pay through the air. And that's kind of what I mean, where I think as the game goes, Nebraska can start opening it up towards the end.
I know you hate score predictions, but for the heck of it, I'm going 28-27 Nebraska.
So you don't think they're covering the 7.7.5, 6.5, whatever point spread?
I will just be pleasantly surprised if they do.
You're right. I do hate trying to predict scores. I'm going to say Nebraska 34, Colorado 20. I think it'll be fairly close halftime, and Nebraska open it up on them.
And then we extend Matt Rule for the rest of his life. Tell us what you guys think score prediction wise. And what's up, Colorado fans?